Sounds good. All right. Well, welcome to another edition of the Indy Investor Speakeasy. Got Brian on again this week. We'll probably have you on. We could probably do like 4 or 5 in a row with you.
I'm good at that.
So we're gonna have him back on in like maybe a month, but nope. A week later, he's back here. We just couldn't get enough of it. So
Run it back. Happy to be here, fellas.
Unfinished conversations.
yeah. So obviously, if anyone listened to the show last week, Brian just basically gave us a rundown of kind of an overview of what he does, what he's good at. We kind of dove a lot into the hiring and finding people kind of portion of it. So we wanted to kind of stay in that loop and kind of take it a couple directions. Maybe talking about how do you scale, how do you find the right business partner, how do you find some funding for deals, and maybe a little bit in between. So Brian, based off of any of those topics, man, kind of where do you want to start with this?
Yeah, I think you mentioned one of the ones you just mentioned right there is when it comes to I think funding and finding money and things like that. That's one of the top. Say if you're talking to like any investor, they're usually going to have one of 5 issues at any point in their business, and it's usually going to come down to leads, sales, hiring and retaining talent, and then basically systems and processes or lending and funding. So I think it's one of the most popular problems that people run into. It always can be a good problem. And I remember I was actually just having this conversation with an investor this week of you always want to try to hit that balance of you're kind of thinking about a scale of basically like you need to be doing enough deals where you're like pushing on like, oh man, we need more funding, or you have enough funding like I need more deals. Yeah. And getting this balanced out, but one of them should always be kind of driving the other one, hopefully. Within that and stuff. So
and usually you see most people thinking, I need more money.
yeah. And that's always the thing is like, you talk to investors all the time. They're just like, oh man, I missed out on like 5 deals last year because I didn't have enough funding or anything. And hopefully hopefully that isn't an issue. And hopefully you can figure out like whether it's private, hopefully you should always have some type of like, traditional funding, if it's bank funding or you have hard money or private money. Hopefully you can have kind of all 3 of those things lined up in some way to get some stuff taken care of. So I'd love to know, you guys have kind of been through that. If you guys are scaling up your business and doing more deals, like what's some advice that you guys have for people out there too that are like, oh man, I'm doing a couple deals right now, but if I had more money, I could do some more. So you guys are talking to private lenders and lining that up. What are some of the conversations you guys are having to help that out?
Yeah, I think we just had a recent episode on this, just something that was top of mind. Just because people are, like you said, are either always looking for more leads, more deals, or they're looking for more money. And one of the problems that we've had recently is we've had a couple of deals that we thought were going to be good deals. We just don't necessarily have enough money because we have all of our other private stuff out on other stuff. Which some of these deals are a little too thin to go towards hard money sometimes. I think we talked about this as well. Deals fit different lenders differently as far as like a private money person or like somebody who wants to get in and out pretty quickly, somebody who's a lot easier to deal with, but you're going to charge a lot more money, and everything like that. But as far as hard money goes on that side of it, but just talking about it with people, like for example, I'm leaving to go out of town this weekend. So I might run into somebody in the airport tonight or tomorrow and ask what I'm doing that I haven't seen in a while and just bring up what you're doing. We golf. Yeah.
He was like, I'm retired and I've been wanting to like get into real estate. Like
looking for duplexes. Yeah.
Duplexes. And he's like, I've been open to the idea of funding like privately. And I'm like, let's get his information.
Yeah. There's people out there. Usually if you go to, I always kind of equated this of like, if I'm sitting at a bar and having a drink or at a restaurant, having dinner or something like that, and if I talk to 3 people around me, usually one of them have some tie to real estate in some way. And if you're in the right circles or in the right environments, such as a golf course, things like that, like if you talk to 3 people, one of them probably have money that they're looking to lend in some way.
Yeah. I think it comes down to like, if you're trying to find like real private money, it's how do you approach it, right? You don't want to approach it to like
salesy.
Hey, give me your money because I need to buy some houses. It's like, no, the best way we talked about this, Brooks, was just explain what you do, and then sprinkle in how you're able to get it done.
Because inevitably, the guy that we golfed with goes,
He goes,
you guys look pretty young. How are you
finding
paying
these
for all
houses?"
these deals?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now we can have a conversation.
People like you
yeah.
and me, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, funding deals, and we'll give them a healthy interest rate and return on the back end, and make it a win-win for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
How are you guys? Do you guys have like a credibility packet that you guys are using for like a case study of like, hey, here's the last 3 deals we've done. Here's what this looked like for us. Here's what this looked like for our investor. You guys have that like kind of ready to go or like something like that.
Yeah,
so I think that's huge. Being able to have that sets you apart from the hey, give me my money or give me your money type person and trust me versus like, hey, you can trust me because of this.
Yeah. So Brooks, he could probably speak more on this, but we were talking about this at lunch today. He's going to update our credibility packet with the last 3 deals that we have private money with, but he's got his own Rothschild Investments where under that kind of name is kind of where he pitches private money opportunities. So you can kind of talk more about that.
Yeah, we basically just put in there. I mean, it's really simple, right? I mean, you just kind of put in there like what you bought the house for, what the exit strategy was, time frame, terms, minimum ROI that somebody's going to get from this, points, and then it's basically just like a case study. Just break it down as like, here's how this deal went, here's how it was funded, here was our lender's ROI on it. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It just has to show like
The real numbers.
Here are the different types of deals that we do. So it could be in and out within a week, or it could be in and out in 6 months. I mean, it just depends on where you want to be. Or I mean, I've had private money in the past where it's just like, here's money, and just give me a check every year.
It's unsecured.
It's just
like, hey, you can use it.
Just
throughout
use it
and
whenever,
stuff, so,
right? I mean,
That's where you.
that's the golden ticket, right? I mean, but there's only again, once that gets tied up into something or it's in and out of something, it's hard to. Obviously, you can't use it for everything. You can only use it for certain stuff, and you kind of got to keep track of what the return is.
Right.
But you want to use it enough that person's getting a good return every year, so you feel like you're fulfilling that.
Yeah. And those are the people that they're usually investing in the stock market, but it's up and down. So like, hey, I can actually give you a consistent return, and sometimes that's what people are looking for.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And not only that, I mean, in worst case scenario, and I shouldn't even say worst case scenario, sometimes it's just easier to deal with hard money. Sometimes you're just going to pay more for it.
Yeah.
And you just it's a math equation like we talk about every. This is why Randy and I are not retail realtors like on market and stuff like that, in terms of like, we're not looking to bring in people who are looking for houses or vice versa for their personal home, because it becomes very emotional. Now it just becomes a math equation. If it's going to cost us more money to get the money to pay for these houses, it just goes into our numbers. So, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And we go to, okay, hopefully we have like a private money lender that's willing, or we haven't used their money yet or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Brian. So to answer your question, I guess, was how, like, the advice on like how do people tap into this? I think get 1 or 2 solid hard money lenders that you can build a good connection with, so they're kind of in your back pocket for the scenario where that fits. Have your credibility packet for private money ready to go. So as soon as you make that connection, go ahead and email that or send it or give it to them in person.
here's what we do.
Here's what we do. But along with like getting your leads, it's kind of like prospecting. It's like a never-ending game. Like, always be looking to build that database of potential. You don't have to find someone with $1 million. You can find someone willing to invest $50,000.
Yeah.
And they could fund part of a deal.
Right. If you find 5 of those people, you got plenty of room.
So
for
just kind of just keep like your your bench full of private money.
People ready to play.
People ready to play.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to. I think it's a lot of times, especially if you're in the wholesaling game or flipping game and stuff like that, there's so many, you spend so much time on like the leads and acquisition side of the business.
Yeah.
when people actually spend just as much time on dispo or spend as much time on funding, like that, it can really make a difference in the business. So that's what I always like to say, like, hey, if your acquisitions, you need to have that dialed in and have a credibility packet and spend time on it. But you need the same thing, your buyers, spend as much time on your buyers and have a credibility packet for that. But it's the same thing with lenders as well. Being able to have that. And
that's kind of a forgotten part too.
Yeah, exactly. Until everybody gets to that point of like, oh crap, I need more money and I need, or oh, I can't do this deal because I don't have the money lined up and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, when Brooks and I partnered up, we kind of, like, that first meeting we had, we're like, hey, like, who's doing what? Because we can't just be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So we kind of came to an agreement where I'll handle the front end of, acquisitions, dispositions, sales stuff. Brooks is more the back end operations, and his big thing was, hey, fund funding.
Yeah,
like that's one of your goals. So I think just if you're in a partnership, like, you guys can't not be going after the same thing, because you might be doing it two different ways, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Randy's better at that side of the business than me, so I'd rather him just run that side, because if I get involved, it's just, I don't want to, like, I could ruin a deal, whereas I know Randy could take down a deal or something like that. And I'm like, just let him go.
Was one deal
I was like, I don't need to be intruding on.
Like, yeah, we've got this under contract for like $95,000, right? I was like, no, it's 50. Like, he's like, oh, okay. Well, he's like, I'll just bow out.
It's
like, this is why I need to stay on my side.
So that brings up an interesting point, because I so many people having this conversation last week, and basically like, hey, what are the top reasons that we talked about why people join a mastermind, like CG or something like that, or community. Somebody asked me last week, like, what are the top reasons people leave? And actually our number one reason, I think, is partnership breakups or divorce. So some type of a breakup is the reason that people would leave a community like that. I want to, as I was kind of reflecting on that, I think it's an important thing, and I want to ask you guys, because I know both of you guys, friends with both of you guys, and things like that. Like, how did you decide, like, hey, yeah, we do want to become partners. We do want to do this? Because I also have that conversation with a lot of people where they're like, oh, I'm struggling with this part of my business. This guy can do leads for me. I'm going to bring them in as a partner. And I'm usually like, do they really need to be a partner? Like, maybe you just hire them.
Yeah.
How did you guys decide on, like, okay, yeah, we do want to, we want to form a partnership. We do want to do this. It makes sense for us to do this. Like, how'd you guys go about that conversation?
Yeah, I think it all kind of started with, so if you don't know, I think everybody, or 90% of the people who listen to this, probably know that Brian and Randy both worked for Simple at one point, and we had a good relationship, and Randy and I would golf quite a bit. And
just as colleagues, it wasn't really like a business.
No, it was just like, we just had fun doing it. We'd bring up business here and there, and be like, hey, what are you working on? Like, what do you do? What are you looking for?
There was never an agenda.
No, it was never like, hey, we're going to get a deal done today. But it was something where, like, my pain point was, like I've mentioned a couple times, I became an accidental wholesaler, and it's not something that I was relatively, I would say, good at in terms. I was better at, like, just reverse wholesaling something. Like, there was stuff that I would have, and I would send it to Simple and be like, hey, are you guys interested, or where would you be? Number? Yeah, where do you guys need to be at? Just not something I totally enjoyed. It was more just to bring in leads for myself to build my rental portfolio, or to do a flip here or there. So that's kind of when, like, me and him just started talking a little bit more, and what he's good at and what he's always done was the sales side of it. And I'm like, man, that's kind of a perfect match, because that's not the side I know that I'm not good at.
Yeah.
Could I do it? Yes. Do I enjoy doing it? No. Whereas Randy was more, and he's mentioned a couple times, he's kind of like the thrill of matchmaking and making the deal work and finding a buyer and stuff like that. He really enjoys doing that, which I enjoy finding the buyer here and there. If I know a couple people that I'm close with, or like, if, for just an example, like if Brian was looking for something, like, and Randy didn't know Brian, I could be like, oh, I talked to somebody recently. I know, like, I can help out here and there. But ultimately that was my pain point. And I'm like, man, this could be a perfect little marriage. So I threw out, like, hey man, like, I don't know if you're interested or not. I don't know if you thought about this or not, but, like, here's what I have going on. And here's the numbers where I can see where this could go, like, or higher, but here's a pretty, conservative. And let me know if you're interested, because this could be a good fit. And then talking with you after that, and I'm like, hey, what do you think if I brought Randy on? And you were like, man, I think that would be really good. So,
so were you
I was looking for somebody to take over my pain point, but I didn't enjoy doing it. And most of my deals, my leads or my deals that I did went to close friends or like colleagues. I mean, obviously Nick's not on today, but like Nick would probably get first. He would get all of my first, like, here's my lead.
Basically, like your database of VIP buyers was like
Yeah.
close people. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, I had a small list, but like Nick, I was like, here, just like if any of these make sense, or like just tell me a number that these make sense at, and I'll work on them.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really a sales process.
Not really,
It was
no,
just,
no, and I just let him build
let's see
that.
what
He had been doing that for Simple for God knows how long, and especially when you left to take to go into your different part of your career. And he kind of took over that whole sales side. Like he probably gained a ton more knowledge on that as well. And I'm like, man, this could be. I'm like, hey, why don't you keep half of the deal instead of a percentage? And I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it as much. Do I still look into it and try to help here and there? And I probably shouldn't. Yeah. And I always get myself in trouble, like the 50 or the 95. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I might. Sometimes it works out. Like I'll say a number to somebody, like dispoing it per se, and I just didn't know that we had it at 50. And I said like, hey, we got it at 95, and I tried to sell it for 100 or 105, and I'm like, I think we got it done, or whatever, however it ends up working. So
yeah. Were you looking for, like, as you were going through that process and stuff like that, like in your head, were you looking for a partner, or were you looking for just like an employee? I think that's always kind of the same.
I think I was looking for an employee at first, and then like it was kind of like an aha moment, and it was kind of just me and him talking through it a little bit. We're having beers after a round one day, and just talking about what was going on in our company, like what was going on, and I'm like, man, this seems like this is stupid. Like, and then we brought it up the next time, and Randy was like, yeah, I wasn't sure if you were serious about that or not, but I started thinking about that a little bit more. Like, yeah, I think we should start thinking about, like, talk through this a little bit. So,
yeah, for me, man, it was kind of the same thinking as Brooks, where I know the ins and outs of basically how to, in a above average level, run a wholesaling company. Like, I know the ins and outs. I think I've got the sales process dialed in as far as I know what works. But what I liked about partnering with Brooks was that he, on like his experience just in investing itself, was more than mine, where he could bring to the table, like, I'm always in a wholesale mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how quick can we flip this deal? Like, what's the spread? Where he's stopped me a couple times with some deals where I'm thinking, this is a knockout home run, like wholesale. He's like, no, I think we should keep this. I don't think like that.
Like, we could keep it for zero money.
He thinks like that because that's his experience. He's got the connections to lending and his personal portfolio, where he sees a lead come in. He's like, how do I keep this? I'm thinking, how do I sell it?
Yeah.
So I think between those two thinkings, we can find the best possible outcome, how to maximize each lead. So that's kind of like what attracted me to the partnership. And then as far as like just outside business, like we have the same kind of mindset of, where are we trying to take this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to be the biggest wholesaler or investing company in Indy, or do we have a certain amount that we want to get above and have a lifestyle where we can still hang out with our family?
Yeah.
We kind of both agreed that we want that lifestyle aspect of it, but still be successful and provide opportunities to people to work with us. But at the end of the day, like, we want to maximize, like, obviously our financial stability, but also our family time. It's huge to us.
Yeah, I think family time was the big thing for both of us. And we're like, hey, if we get there and we've hired correctly and we've figured that part of it out, like, we could probably scale it and keep that at some point. But like, first and foremost, here's where we want to get to, or where we've gotten to pretty well, in a sense. And like, if we want to keep going, we can, but we have to keep in mind, like, here was our end goal. Like, if it's going to pull us in and away from our family more, then I think that's something where Randy would be like, hey, let's dial it back a little bit. Whereas it's just like we kind of check each other sometimes, like where like he wanted, like there's a deal that was a kind of a wonky deal where it was kind of like a split pad situation where it was renting it by the room. And I'm like, hey man,
You really wanted to take it.
and I really wanted to take it. He probably could have wholesaled it for, I don't know, like 10 grand or so, or we could have wholetailed it for 10 grand or so. We ended up not doing the deal just because of the situation that the house, it was just a
We've had some
wonky,
experience for this.
it was just a wonky situation really. And neither one of us had a ton of experience with like that side of investing.
Yeah.
So we're like, all right, let's not do this
Well,
one.
so,
Let's let
Brooks's
this
mindset,
one.
He was like, let's.
And I'm like, man, I already have this ran through with a
so-
lender that I can like. If we get them, like, we'll just take the money, we'll buy it flat out cash.
We were a signature away from closing that deal.
And
It
I-
came down to the seller, not signing.
We signed our side, but we didn't get the seller to sign his side. Is really
Like,
what
the
it came
lending
to.
was there.
I had it refied, and I'm like, man, we're gonna have a rental here. We could either keep it or we could still wholesale it if you want to. But I've refied it with
Get all our money back.
all of our money is out of it. We just have to pay the upfront money to close on it. It's already refied. If that's already done, it might take a week or two to get the paperwork done. And on top of that, the way it was refied, like we probably would have made 15 grand on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this is kind of like we just wholesaled it to ourselves. You know what I mean? But it was also a thing where me and him were just like, we sit down and we have a good conversation about it. And we're like, man, this is just a weird deal that there's probably not a ton of buyers for, just the way it's structured. So if it works out, it works out, and we can keep it and be fine. Like it cash flows. We made money on it on the front end. We got money in our pocket, and there's just no risk here. It seems like, but
Yeah. For that deal, it was so weird that things kept popping up for it not to close. And for me, after like the third or fourth
Where there's
time
smoke,
I
there's
checked
fire.
out, I'm like, you know what? This is like, it's just not meant to.
he kept saying like, he goes, that deal's out of my head at this point.
I know,
I'm still thinking about it.
I told him in my head,
That deal's dead.
In my head, we're not doing it. We've already moved on. If it happens, it happens. But I'm not trying to pursue it anymore.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something that you guys said, because I think it's super important as you guys talking about that partnership and stuff, the what you guys have. It's if you're somebody out there that's listening and you are somebody that's like, hey, I'm looking for a partner, or I have a partnership, is it working out or anything? What these guys said is so important on the fact that they have the same goal in mind. They know that their number one thing is family time and stuff like that. And then you guys can you guys are checking each other, having that conversation all the time of, hey, are we scaling the right way? Or are we scaling the way that we want to? We still have that same end goal in mind, because that's usually what happens. And that's usually why people do split up a partnership, because you got one partner that has big visions and just wants to keep going, wants to keep, grow it as big as possible. And then one is like, I'm kind of liking my lifestyle right now. I'm kind of liking what's going on. And so it's always important as you guys are going through that, of even right now you have that in your mind, but you need to always have that conversation of like, hey, are we still on pace with what with how we want to grow and where we're going to get to our end goal and everything.
And it's nice that we had that goal like from the beginning, because every once in a while I'm like, man, like for whatever reason, like when staffing issues come up or something like that, I'm like, okay, I feel like we're getting a lot of stuff, like something's happening where like Randy has to be on the phones a ton more. And I'm like, I'm trying to get that automatically buzzes me, and I'm like, I need to get him off the phones.
Yeah.
Like I need to fix that issue, or like that's on me now to figure that out, and that's a real thing that we're working through right now.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Well, we were having that conversation last week where I was like kind of pushing you guys. I'm like, guys, you guys have this many leads coming in. There's no reason that you guys can't take those phone calls. But the reality is, like, Brian, we don't want to take those phone calls. We would rather hand it off. And like, yeah, that makes sense. So
I enjoy, like, as far as that part of it, I enjoy, like, training and helping people grow. So, like, I like someone in that seat that I could watch their progress go up and work with them. And that's just kind of where I'm at. Like, I 100% agree. Like, I can do it, right? But it's a full-time job.
Yeah, but do you want to do it from 8 to 10 at night?
That's,
you know,
that's
right?
what it would take.
Yeah.
That's how our database shows how many leads are in there. You could do it all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely could do it.
And with some of the funnels that we've started, some of the other stuff that's starting to hit now, like it'd be nice to have Randy needs to work on warmer leads and just get them like because he's a
Yeah.
closer. Like he'll just get them closed.
Yeah.
So Brian, speaking of how the partnership works, like, what do you recommend? Like, how does that flow work throughout the year to make sure, like, this, maybe it's a CEO, COO, or general partnership, whatever you want to call them. Like, how often should they be having those conversations? How does that look like, and like what's the best practices for that?
Yeah. So I think if you do have any kind of partnership, or just maybe it's a CEO, COO relationship, number one, number two, visionary integrator, however you want to call it, or partners, I think there needs to be at least a monthly meeting on that of like, hey, are we on track? Are we doing this and things like that? And then
Almost like a check-in.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I personally recommend a weekly same page meeting where there is some part of that conversation of like, hey, taking a look at like your 1-page plan, or like, are we good for this month? And then, your monthly meeting is going to be a little bit more in depth. Okay. Are we good for the quarter? Are we good for the year? That kind of thing. And then obviously your quarterly meetings, are going to be a little bit more of like, hey, are we on track for what our end goal is? Are we doing what we need to within the next 90 days? Or did we do what we did? Did we do what we needed to the last 90 days? Are we going to do what we need to the next 90 days for our 1-year goal, our 2-year goal, our long-term goal? Always checking to make sure you're good on that. So, I've never been in a situation or had a conversation with a team or coached somebody through where I've implemented like a weekly same page meeting, even if it's just like a half hour where they've come back and said like, it's too much. We can't meet that much. I've had some people like, it's gonna be tough to fit that in my schedule. But once they actually implement that meeting on a weekly basis and have some conversations, then they're like, okay, that was worth it. That's usually the response I get. And that weekly meeting doesn't have to be it's not an in-depth of like, all right, what do you want? What's the meaning of life? It's not one of those. It's just like checking to make sure like you're on pace for what you need to do that month. And then you're on pace for what you need to do that quarter and then that year,
Like,
and stuff.
It's probably like a good time where, hey, I had this thought this week where, could we do this? And then you guys can either say yes or squash it.
Let's risk test it a little bit.
Yeah. It's really your weekly and monthly meetings. That's your working in the business. And then like your monthly to quarterly, yearly stuff, that's what you're working on the business.
Yeah. So to build on that a little bit, for how Randy and I run things, we both work remote. So we're just like, all right, at least once a week, we need to get together for
a Brooks and Randy meeting.
Let's get together for lunch. Let's work a couple hours at a coffee shop together.
How often does that meeting happen on a golf course?
Well, now that it's warm, it's gonna happen every week. Before we were partners, we played just about every Friday is what our goal was. Whether business let us do that or not.
Yeah.
What was going on in our respective, whatever was going on. But now we're just like, okay, Fridays are like, we're going to get together and I think we're both relatively good at like, hey, what do you need me? Do you need anything from me? Like, what do I need to be working on?
Yeah.
I usually roll into the weekly golfs with like, here's my top 3 things I think we can cover.
It's good.
Kind of go from there. And I think if we, like once we get, if we do more deals, grow the team a little bit, there's gonna be more to talk about. But right now, it's just kind of the basics of, what's the top 3 things we need to focus on for the following week. What do we suck at this week?
Yeah. What do you need me to focus on this coming week?
So that's important.
Yeah.
So, that's awesome.
It's nice that kind of, and that wasn't something that me and him planned either. That just kind of happened organically, that we just kind of check in every once in a while.
I'm going to go back to, you mentioned this before, Randy, so as you guys are partners, you kind of decided to, I love the things you guys are saying of like, hey, you guys had the same goals and long-term goals in mind. You guys have your check-ins, things like that. And it sounds like you guys have come to this spot too, where what each other's strengths are versus what their, areas of improvement are and things like that, or things that are just like, hey, you should not be touching that. Like, leave that alone. How have you guys done as you guys formed a partnership, you guys came together, and maybe how did you go about some of those conversations? How did you decide like who's doing what in the org chart, or whose responsibilities are what? And then how much of that have you guys changed over what you originally thought to what it is maybe now?
Honestly, man, I think it stayed pretty consistent. I think if anything, like I have no problem not stepping into his space where it comes to like the back end stuff, all the paperwork and business side of things, and I think he doesn't like it either. But that's his description, right?
Yeah.
I think if anything, like Brooks has maybe came in and dabbled into the CRM, like what the leads are.
I'll just ask questions.
Ask questions about deals where we probably already have that stuff documented in Slack somewhere. I'd say the details are there.
Nice.
But overall, it's been pretty consistent. Of like, hey, here's my lane, here's your lane. But if I need help, I'll tag you in.
Yeah, and like what you said when we first went over it, we probably took 3 or 4 different meetings.
Yeah.
Probably 3, where we drew up like, here's responsibility, like here's what I came up with. Like, read through this, like let me know what you think. Like, give me some edits.
But we also have like here's what we both should be doing.
Yes.
And that's like, hey, we both should be networking. We both should be making connections.
Correct.
We should be always putting ourselves out there. It's not like, hey, since I'm in the sales position,
and we both enjoy that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Brooks isn't expecting me just to do the networking because I'm in sales. Like, I think that's brand awareness, right? Like, get in front of people. Everyone in your company should be doing that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the salespeople or whoever it is. I think if you're on the top, if you're CEO or COO, you should definitely always be in that networking seat because that's where all the connections are made.
Yeah, and actually that's something I forgot. Like, we've kind of put it here's what both of us are good at. Seems like we enjoy, and we both. And I sent it to him. I'm like, hey, read over this. Like, give me some edits. Like, and he would just be like, here's what I would take out. Here's what I would add. And before we even like formed the partnership, we kind of had that. And that's probably something actually that you brought that up that we should revisit and just be like, all right, let's read through all this again. And like, what do we need to add? Like, there's probably stuff that has come up.
And what can you take off that somebody else you can hire to a VA, you can hire to an assistant or dispatch manager.
There's probably a lot of stuff on that list.
Probably a lot of stuff on that list.
It was last September we made that list, so
mm-hmm.
I guarantee there's a lot of stuff on that list where we could utilize our VAs now or your brother to on that stuff.
Yeah, we need to. That's a good call that you brought that up because that's something I forgot about that we did. Well, I knew that I still knew that we did it. I knew that we were following it, but it's something that we need to go back and actually look at the bullet points of it.
Yeah. So a little plug here for a book. If you have not read Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time, really easy read, really great book and stuff like that. But going through his exercise of the Elevate Delegate exercise is so important when you're at that point of like, hey, okay, where am I spending my time and what's making us the most revenue? Like making sure you stay in those areas when you reach that level of like, okay, we have enough money to bring on a VA or an assistant or something like that. Where can I get some of my time back? I think it's huge.
Yeah. So I guess a question I had for you would be like, if somebody was starting out in
I'm sorry not to cut you off. Can I ask one question about this? Because you guys both mentioned that how it's both of your responsibilities for the networking side of things and kind of both focus on that stuff, whether it's finding deals or finding buyers or finding money and stuff like that. So you both mentioned that's very important for both of you guys. Do both of you guys have a KPI that you guys are held accountable to track that?
We don't. That's something that we should probably revisit. And
I was about to just bring that up. One thing that we should probably add is like how do we judge this? Networking events should we be doing a month? How many meetings should we be booking?
Yeah, because we've talked about it. We just don't have it like written down.
Yeah.
So which is a good call.
KPIs are just sales focused, which I know is bad. I know.
No, it's all good. All good.
But like there definitely need to be some like CEO, COO KPIs for sure.
Yeah, it's that's one of the things that Jason and I have really worked on, and where we've really kind of developed our relationship as a number one and number two within our business is basically like we operate under the premise of if you can't show it, it hasn't got done, and it's probably not going to. So like there's little things of like, oh yeah, I'm working on this. No, don't tell me about what you're working on. Like show me what you're working on. Or hey, we did this last week. Okay, did it? Like show me that it happened. So
question,
whether it's a KPI or tracker or so it could be anything. So it could be a tracker that if it's KPI, it's a tracker that the numbers in there documented, or if it's a process.
Okay.
It's basically like, hey, it's on a spreadsheet, or it's in
our something as stupid as like I'm attaching
is.
You to an email so you can see like here's who I've reached out to this week.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then you're tracking it.
Yeah. So tracking it. And stuff.
But actually having I reached out to 4, 3, whatever.
Yeah. Typical thing that you're gonna have with if you guys have
scorecard.
Yeah, you guys are working with, if he's having the one that's having a conversation with you or who's ever managing your guys' cold calling or whatever, like, okay, he has that, he had that conversation, but can he show it to you what's actually happening versus just telling you that, hey, this is what we talked about, this is what they're doing, but hey, here's the numbers from the cold callers. Here's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So what's getting you guys so much success is that everyone in your organization has a scorecard or some sort of tracking.
Everybody has.
Like
I think I was talking about last week how we have like basically our 1-page plan and the implementation schedule with it.
Everyone has one.
Everybody on our team has a 1-page plan of their own with an implementation schedule of their own and metrics that they're tracked on their own.
1-page plan, you said the metrics are there. So if you had the question of did this get done or how is this going, it should be the scorecard tells all.
Yep,
right?
and we know exactly so we have the numbers that they're hitting and also hey, the month of May, we're in the month of May now, so I know exactly what Danielle needs to do in the month of May, what Will needs to do, what Matt needs to do, what the sales team needs to do. So I will say the sales team is a tricky with that of having them on having individual 1-page plans, they have their own individual goals and metrics and more scorecard stuff. But as far as we have a team 1-page plan for the sales team of kind of what with the projects and implementation and stuff like that, it's not really individual, it's more team based. So we have a team one for that.
Yeah, this is where we get a little we always forget, was this recorded or not? Did we bring this up last week about the 1-page plan, or was that something that we talked about separately? Because I remember we talked about this off air at a certain point in last week or the last couple weeks, and Randy and I were like, "That's a good idea. We need to that's something I think we could implement." Or what Nick, I think he said on air last week was yeah, he definitely did, because he was like, I send out an email every week. Here's what I plan. Here's what I want to get done this week. Yeah. Which we both afterwards were like, that's a good idea. We need to figure out how we need to make that our own.
And I was just talking to Brett about this yesterday he's saying
Brett Snodgrass, if anybody.
Brett Snodgrass. Yeah. He was talking about how basically they're not really working with a business coach right now. So so he's having because I've helped him out with that and he's done a great job of that and stuff too. But it's always comes down to when you're working with EOS or you're working with, a system like that, it's always broken down into quarterly rocks. And I was kind of explaining to him, actually we kind of gone away from the quarterly stuff and put stuff on a yearly basis. Hey, here's all the stuff we want to accomplish in the year, but then we take it and break it down by month. So we literally have a monthly implementation schedule for that the entire year. So we're not necessarily looking at I don't know. I mean, you've worked with me enough to know sometimes you hit those quarterly rocks, but it's okay, now if you don't get done, it's kind of a 90-day thing of all right, do we mess up that 90 days? Do we keep doing it to extend it? But basically we just broke it down okay, now we need just to extend this a month, or hey, we need to take this goal. This is going to be a 4-month implementation, but this is now going to be a 6-month, or hey, we need to move this back to October and start it there. But we know it's going to take 4 months to get finished, but we're not going to start until October and things. So it's put us in a different mindset, but it's so easy for everybody to be on the same page within our organization for it. So.
Yeah. I know there's different ways to look at a lot of that stuff too, whether it works quarterly best for some people or monthly, or I think there's another book that breaks it down into here's how you can, forget the name. You were talking about this book recently. It was the 4 month, something about the
12-week year.
12-week year. That's what it was.
We when I was with Simple, the last year I was with Simple, we basically ran the whole year off that because that was when the market changed. We didn't know what was going to happen, so we thought it was smart to basically run the year on 12 weeks, and after 12 weeks,
it's a new plan.
Yeah,
because the market was always changing. We didn't know what was happening, so it was a very appropriate year to do that.
That's a great point, Randy, because that's very different than some people are if you take your yearly goals and break them down by quarter, that's one thing to do. But we're reevaluating the business every 90 days or every 12 weeks.
At 12 weeks, we restarted. And said, okay, what's the new year? What's this next 12 weeks going to look like? And then the year ends up being what the year ends up being because of what we did during the 12 weeks.
I think that's a good way to look at it too, especially on the unknown years. And I also would like to throw a disclaimer in there as well. One strategy that worked this year, you might like something better than next year. You don't have to do the same process. I feel every year, even though
realistically, you probably shouldn't.
Whether it worked or it didn't, you should look back and be okay, did we like that? Do we want to try it again for this year? And maybe you do try it again for another year, or do we want to try like this other thing for the first half of the year? When do you make that decision to kind of start tweaking with that side of the process? Like you're almost building a process for the process, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. I mean, we literally do have a process for how to implement a process or
Yeah.
evaluate a process.
Yeah. It's just, I guess we're getting a little bit more in the weeds than we thought. But
But that's a great, really the overarching theme of that is basically like what is working today might not work tomorrow, or the people that get you to this point might not be the people that get you to the next point. Kind of the same thing. You should always be evaluating your processes, what's working, that's why it's important to have the KPIs and the numbers and things like that. And then also evaluating your people that are getting you to those points as well.
or maybe be like, man, I really like what we did 3 years ago. Like, do we feel like maybe we should go back to that and try that again? Like, I think it's good to reflect on some of that stuff and grow a little bit more instead of like, you feel like you're growing, but maybe going back to something that worked before might be growing as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the real estate business is always going to change and stuff like that. Like whatever your best lead gen source was 1 year is probably not going to be the same. It's going to change. And there's so many people that are doing digital stuff right now. And you see with direct mail is like the biggest case of this, of like 5 years ago, like direct mail was the hot thing that everybody was just starting. And then it kind of went away for a little bit because everybody was doing cold calling and texting, and then it came back for a little bit more. Now everything's digital. So the people that have been consistent with direct mail are doing pretty well within things. But if you're waiting for that hot thing going on, you're probably not going to do well with it because you're not going to have the consistency for it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like people, if direct mail is the hot thing, right, they'll do it for a couple months and they're like, I didn't get any calls. Or if they would wait 2 more months, that's when the calls start flowing in.
Because it's going to take at least probably 7 touches or something like that to get.
And going into that, you got to know.
It never happens overnight.
Yeah, and you got to know like that marketing channel, especially like you have to know like this is more a long term play. Like you have to understand like let's reevaluate after a year and see like if this worked. And
I would say your goal is to only do 1 or 2 deals a year to do direct mail.
Yeah.
Like if like 1 or 2.
That's so for example, like for people listening, like that's what I did when I was on my own before Randy came on. Is like I did direct mail. I was completely sold on it and it was working well for me. I wasn't getting a ton of leads, but I didn't need a ton of leads. But the leads that were coming in were decent. I wasn't wholesaling per se. Like these were for me, and whatever I didn't want or couldn't take down were for others. So when Randy came in, we implemented another marketing channel for cold calling that I would have never done in the past. Not something that I was even interested in. And Randy was like, let's try this. Like this has been working for not only Simple in the past or recently, but some other companies that he had heard from, that he had talked to. And I'm like, okay, go. Yeah, like this is your side. Like this is now your side. Like I understand that's not my side anymore.
Yeah, my biggest thing with that was just
I was blown away.
I just never liked the marketing where you have to rely on the customer to call you, because you just can't control that, right?
Yeah.
It's up to them to pick up the phone and call you. I need them to answer my call. And I like that because it's like an instant. Maybe it's not a lead, but at least I can cross that name off the list and move on to the next one. Where we do that in direct mail, we hit both sides of it.
Yeah.
Where you get the weekend leads from direct mail, and you get your Monday through Friday leads from active prospecting. And
whereas it
doesn't have to be cold calling. I mean, you can do other things, but
texting if you know how to do it correctly. Like it, if you know how to do texting correctly,
that's an option too. Where like you just have to be able to actively reach out to people for them to respond.
Or
they're gonna get that postcard and they're gonna say, I like this idea. They're gonna put it on their table, and then it's gonna get lost, and then months go by, and then they'll call you or
thrown away and they forgot about it.
Yeah.
My mindset was when I was doing direct mail by myself was the leads that we're going to call, they've raised their hand saying they want to sell their house. They've come to the decision. This was a warm lead already. I felt like I wasn't bothering people.
That's
which was my mindset, which is a good lead, but the leads that we needed and the conversion rate was just not there.
Those people are now your nurture database.
Yeah, so that's become
that's your new direct mail list. list.
For
That's why you
example,
need that 3-legged stool. I would say you need that. Basically,
which is something I didn't think about until Randy came in.
A 1 or 2-legged stool isn't going to stand on its own. We got a 3-legged stool where your 3 legs are essentially like, hey, I have outbound, inbound, and your internal nurture systems. So like, if you guys are working those leads, you're going to have success in some way, and it's going to be up and down, and
Randy's sales mindset said like, we need the leads, whether they say no, maybe yes, like. We're talking to them.
If we had a conversation,
like somebody might not know they want to sell until we talk to them. And I was like, duh. Like why why did I thought
break out the Brent Daniels
Right?
talk to people.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean it's literally TTP, right? And I've watched so many of his podcasts and I'm like, man, I would just rather have somebody say like, hey, I got your mail. Let's get together, like, and walk my house, build a relationship, and that was it. But it just wasn't scalable for like a business partnership.
So what he's saying, Caitlin asked for the first date versus him asking her.
No, I think I got that one. Neither one of us were looking. I had to force that one a little bit.
That is a funny story to me. We don't have to get into that.
Maybe that's another podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I guess leading into another question is like, oh shit, I had it on the top of my head before we started talking about that. But for say CG, when you were thinking about joining that in terms of like in the COO role, how did you and Jason figure out how that dynamic was going to work? Because it's just as much you as him. Like he's looking for somebody to come take over certain stuff. How did you guys go about that? Was it similar to how me and Randy sat down and said, here's what we think we can help each other with?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I feel like looking back at it is like because they were using a recruiting firm and everything. Like they had a job description written up and they knew exactly what they're looking for in a COO. And I kind of came in and maybe didn't check all those boxes, but obviously having been a member and been through certain stuff, run a real estate investing business, I was coming in some transferable skills that made up for some of that. I on paper, I am not who should all hire for a COO position.
I always thought it was hilarious because you're so good at it.
I can do it, but it's one of those things that like I think it's the transferable skills of being analytical as a math teacher, being organized as a teacher, and being being that authoritative person if I need to as a principal and things like that. I have some of those transferable skills. But realistically, it's like it's funny of what was originally on my job description is very different than kind of what I'm doing now. But that's because of our business growth already over 17 months. I think that I've been in this position of like where our business is completely different. Like we have 2 new products now. We have a new partnership with another mastermind that came on board. No, I mean it was the goal that Jason said, like that's what came. Jason did very well as a visionary, as that CEO of like, here's where we're gonna get to. We got to figure out how to get there. Here's some ideas. Here's what I think we need to do. But essentially, like, hey, here's the end goal. Here's what we're working towards, and everything we talk about, whether it's a weekly meeting or monthly meeting, quarterly, it all relates back to like where we want to get to in the end and stuff. So we've done things a little bit quicker than what we thought, and changed some things up. We just had a conversation yesterday of like possibly bringing on somebody new in a new position that we did not have scheduled on our, when we did our yearly planning at the beginning of the year, we didn't have this in the budget. We don't have it in it, but it's like, okay, now I can now I have to build a business plan around this. Does this make sense? Or can we use this as an ancillary product and all those things? So then you weigh that decision and where does it fit into the priority of our implementation schedule and stuff like that. But we're like what you said, or come back to your question, he had a plan for it in place and we had a business plan for it in place. So going after it and figuring out just attacking that. And that's what everything relates back to, and things are going to change. And what I'm doing is a little bit different than what we originally thought it was going to be in things, but it's all relates to the end goal. But we're always communicating about it as well. Just like, hey, should we, and we have conversations about this sometimes too. Just like, hey, should we even be talking about this yet? Probably not, but let's put it in let's put it on here. We'll talk about it in a month or 2 weeks, or we just delete it later on or something.
And you make that decision based off the one-page plan.
Based off of what is best for the business.
You guys are really, one of you's really excited about it. the other one has to kind of reel the other one back and be like,
Yeah.
this isn't a priority
Yeah.
right now because we haven't done this yet. Is that how that works?
A lot of times. So this is why on paper I'm maybe not the best COO, because I have more visionary traits than operational
I was
traits.
literally going to bring that up. I was like, how do you manage two?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you're a very good visionary. I don't know
Yeah.
Jason at all.
Well, that's why.
And you mentioned that he was a visionary, and I'm like, man, how do you guys manage like two? Like, I can understand how the growth can be astronomical, but I mean, how do you guys manage that?
Well,
That's
that's
what-
simple. He was the CEO and COO at the same time because he could do that.
Mhm.
Like he was like a rare breed where you can make that happen. But yeah,
But it's those conversations of like, hey, because we both come with those new ideas and things like that and want to do stuff, but then it's like, it's calming us down. So I'm not always the one. I'll get excited about an idea, like, yeah, let's do that and stuff. But that's my go-to before I'm like, okay, when and why and how and what's the budget and all those things. And we're getting better at it and stuff. But coming back to Jason is way more detail oriented than I am. So, he is coming back to that premise of like, of basically like, if it didn't it didn't happen if you can't show it, like that whole premise. So anytime as we're going through all these conversations, is basically it's putting the details in there and putting the process in place and stuff like that. So like I was just mentioning, we just had this conversation this week on possibly hiring somebody that we didn't even think about. Now I have to basically show him why we should do it. So versus just he and I saying like, yes, let's do it, let's run with it and stuff, and we'll figure it out later. It's never we'll figure it out later. It's like we got to figure it out now, at least 60-75% of it now, and then we'll figure out kind of the rest later.
And then does he have to check you and be like, all right, here's the organization of like, here's what we actually need to do to make that happen?
Yeah, then it's all like,
And then
okay, here's what
you
we're
just
going to
go
need
down
to
the
do, and it's
checklist.
just like putting all those steps in
Is
place.
it worth
like,
it? Like, should we do it now? Should there just be a long, like, man, like to like having those, you and him together, I feel like you could grow so fast. I almost feel like you guys should be like co-CEOs at some time, and like let's hire two COOs underneath both of them and just let them just, man, I feel like that could explode things.
Could explode something, but you have to have the
The structure
operational
under
support
it,
behind everything, or it's never going to be, it's never going to last.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have as many ideas and go out there as many you can, but the reality is, to be a good visionary and a good you always say number one, number two, the number one has to be able to like put 10 items on the board, and then the number two has to be able to say, hey, out of those 10 items, one or two of those are good, we got to scrap the rest of them, or we got to put the other ones on hold. So
Yeah,
you got to be able to do that. Versus, which she and I sometimes are like, oh man, yeah, like 6 of those ideas are good, but it's like,
yeah,
luckily we have a pretty good relationship where we can kind of break it down into like, what do we need to focus on right
or
now?
like more realistic. Let's get we can do these now.
Yep. Or
These
what's
other
the
other
top
ones need to
priority?
hold.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what we came back to. We did that this week. It's just like, hey, we're working on these 12 different things, but what are the first 2 that need to get done within the next couple of days?
Yeah. I
The
feel like
next couple of weeks. Then what comes after that? What comes after that?
I have that issue sometimes where I feel like I'm scatterbrained a little bit.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, man, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this.
The
I'm like, hey, let's finish this
Yeah.
first and get this working correctly.
The ideas are the easy part. The
Yeah.
ideas and the
The
plan,
implementation.
the goal, that's the easy stuff. But actually implementing it and make sure it gets done is the tough stuff. So,
Yeah. It's like you need like somebody to control the ADD sometimes.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It's like, all right, let's get you back focused again, which I'm doing right now because I'm like sending us all over the board. So,
I do have a question for you guys. I don't know how long we're going to run here today, but I want to ask you guys this question before we get out of here today. What is how much do you think Caitlin Clark is going to affect the Indy real estate market?
wow. Obviously, I think it's going to have a big effect. I think, and I wish I would have known you were going to ask this question before this podcast. I would love to look up the numbers on like the interest level or tickets that the Fever have probably already sold. I know it's probably they're probably like, holy crap, like people want to come to our games now. So not only that, but like even opposing teams fans might even come because they want to see Caitlin Clark play, and if it's a close game in the town, I think people will go just to see her play. She's got so much attention over the tournament and over her college career. I personally I feel it already just in the community. Dude, that's all they talk about. She's all over billboards, Facebook ads, like everything. So
not only
it's
that,
it's gonna impact us more than I think people realize for a WNBA, which is outrageous.
Yeah. Not only that,
Talking
like
about that.
just Iowa fans in general are gonna.
It's so close,
gonna
so they
start-
can just drive
yeah,
over and
They're gonna start. I feel like that's gonna be not only bring more fans to the arena, but it's gonna flood the city a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, my wife even brought up to me like she's seeing stuff on Facebook where she just moved here probably like last week, I think, and people are seeing her out and about as far as like at the grocery store or something like that, or coffee shop or wherever. She said she saw on Facebook where people or Instagram where she saw people seeing her. But it's just I feel like my brother, for instance, wants to come out and come see her.
Yeah.
Like
He's in Maryland.
he's in Maryland. Like it's so yeah. I should preface. I'm from Maryland originally. My brother still lives there. My family's still there. My brother was like, I mean, next time I come out to see you, like, can we go to a Fever game or something?
So it's crazy. I think it's going to completely like affect, like it's going to have a huge impact on the short-term rental market, especially in downtown and around and stuff. You know, we
saw that with the eclipse.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that. Like, it was crazy how much the short-term rentals like went up and sold out and stuff with the eclipse not too long ago. It was pretty cool. Actually, I was pretty impressed by it.
I was very impressed by
my
it.
expectations were not high.
Me neither.
And then when it happened, I was like, wow, that was really
pretty cool. Yeah.
I might travel for the next
Yeah,
one.
we did the same thing. Anna was like, drug me out of my office and like, all right, let's go out. We're gonna go outside and watch this. All right, she got the glasses. Like, all right, what's going on here? But I was like, that's pretty cool.
Like at first, I thought it was really cool because you look through the glasses and like you can see it, but you can't tell too much at first. And then like the more and more it goes on, and then obviously the full, and you're like, holy shit, this is like birds went quiet.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Like my dogs were just laying down like they wanted to go to bed. I'm like, are they asleep right now? My parents were out actually I should say they flew out right before it to here, and then they left right before it actually happened. But on the way here, they said that their flight was like everybody on their flight was flying out for the eclipse from Maryland.
Yeah.
I don't rather if they were coming through BWI to get there or they were actually from Maryland, but she said like everybody on the flight was coming for the eclipse, and I was like, that's crazy.
It's the and it's the same thing with Caitlin Clark for their like the first couple weeks of their home games. Like, check out the short-term rentals around downtown and stuff. Like it's tough to get one.
The season soon.
Yeah, it's I think May 14th is their first game. Yeah,
Let alone
They start
let alone if playoffs and stuff start whenever that rolls around for them.
yeah. So
when the playoffs happen. Yeah, it's gonna be.
but that's what's fun. I mean, the Pacers are in the second round right now, but there's more people talking about Caitlin Clark than the Pacers right now. So it's
I remember she was at one of the playoff games, and they just kept showing her on TV.
It's like the Taylor Swift effect.
It kind of like I mean, it has to be close or more. And I mentioned to you guys before the podcast that one of my buddies said that he had heard from two of his friends, whether they know or not, whether it's correct or not, but he was like, they had read that Caitlin Clark has sold more Indiana Fever jerseys than the Dallas Cowboys sold jerseys last year. And I'm like, that is a big deal.
That's crazy.
Because the Cowboys sell hella jerseys.
Well, not only the Cowboys, but any NFL. And to be, I mean, so like the only person that probably has come close to this is probably Shohei Ohtani that I can think of, or I don't know.
He would bring it back to baseball.
Michael Jordan or LeBron James or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, any NFL, right? Like nobody competes with the NFL, let alone the Dallas Cowboys and like their merch sales and stuff like that. So the fact that a WNBA player is doing this is just absolutely that's nuts. Like, I mean, the valuation of the Cowboys we know is like probably 6 to 8 billion, and a lot of that's merch sales.
So if you are in short-term rentals or a property manager for short-term rentals, make sure you're
looking at that
bumping up
WNBA
those prices a little bit.
Yeah, looking at the
Fever
WNBA
games,
home games.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably not something you needed to do last year. They finished in last place. So
yeah, another thing to look out for that I think we just got news on this week was that Indy's trying to get a professional MLS team. So that could be a big deal in coming years.
Yeah, that will be cool. I mean, even if they don't get that and they still have the Indy 11, like I'm excited about the complex and stuff down there. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects everything. And they do get an MLS team and then what they do with the 11. But
yeah.
So
I'm pumped for. I mean, we're talking about sports now. Like I'm pumped for like the hockey team to come up to Fishers, and
Yeah.
and then the basketball team will be down in Noblesville too.
Yep.
So like no longer in Fort Wayne.
In Fort Wayne, yeah.
A lot of good sports coming to the north side for once.
Colts had a good draft, so they should have a good season. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Anything else you can think of that we can touch on? And I know we probably got a couple more podcasts that we can
I mean,
probably.
it's been another killer episode. I mean, Brian comes with the fire as always. So,
Yeah.
Anything else you want to discuss or ask?
I think we're good with this
If not,
episode.
save it to the next one.
I just had my last sip of bourbon here, so I think we're good on this episode.
Cool, man. Sounds good. That's been another Indy Investor Pod. Indy Investor Pod. Shout out Brett Snodgrass and the Indy Investor Pod, because that was one of my favorite podcasts, and you guys haven't heard it yet, but I've done this multiple times that we've had to delete out. This is another edition of the Indy Investor Speakeasy.
There were some really good hosts on the Indy Investor Pod. So.
Yeah, there was.
Indy Investor Speakeasy.
Two of them right here.
Yeah, so Indy Investor Speakeasy. That's a wrap. Brian Snider. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you guys.